Chào mừng quý vị quay trở lại với chương trình Tôi về Việt Nam trên kênh Quyền FBNC với cuộc trò chuyện với anh Sean Ngô, là giám đốc điều hành của Việt Nam Franchises, là một tổ chức cung cấp các dịch vụ tư vấn về vấn đề nhượng quyền thương mại, đặc biệt là các thương hiệu lớn của nước ngoài. So, Sean, for the big brands coming from the state, from America, when they come here looking for franchisees, so franchisee fee must be expensive, right?
Well, it's expensive, but it's not expensive. Usually what happens is the franchisors know what the value of their brand is. They kind of know before they go into a market like Vietnam what the profitability might be. So they understand that if I charge a certain franchise fee, if I charge a certain royalty, my franchisee in Vietnam, in Thailand, in the Philippines can still make good money and offer them the right returns that they need to make an investment into acquiring the franchise. So they know overall what that process is, what it looks like, and they look for the franchisee to provide that detail for confirmation when they are in the process of acquiring the franchise.
Do they have different policies for each market, or it's going to be the same, universal?
I think that's a very good question. I think it's a combination of different countries and different market dynamics because, of course, obviously disposable income and middle class and all those key important factors are very different from country to country. We also know that there are many dynamics that are different. Singapore is a very different market than the Philippines, for example, right? We have different issues about rent, different issues about people cost, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think many franchisors are very flexible with that format. It just really depends on the right franchisee, the market, and of course the number of units that the franchisee commits to.
Which markets in Asia do you think Vietnam is kind of follow the same path of development in terms of franchising big brands?
You know, I think, from talking to many international franchisors, they're very excited about the prospects of Vietnam. Vietnam is going to be the next emerging star from a franchising retail standpoint. And I think, Vietnam has many key demographics that many franchisors are looking for, right? A growing middle class. In fact, I recently saw some news about how Vietnam's middle class will grow to about 2/3 of Thailand's by the 2020. A very large market, and certainly Vietnam is catching up and exceeding some of these other markets. So the potential is quite high, and I think, in a market like that, I think it's very proactive. Vietnam itself generates a lot of local franchises, even better than some of the other regional countries, which have been doing this for many years before. So you have many great brands like Trung Nguyen, Rap and Roll, Pho 24. All of these brands are going international. And so I think there's a lot of interest in Vietnamese brands, and I think they have a lot of potential. And they'll probably follow in the footsteps of markets like the Philippines, where it's very developed. There are over 1,500 franchise systems in the Philippines alone. And the majority of those franchise systems are actually homegrown from the Philippines. So I think Vietnam is trending towards that way, where in the future we will have certainly more foreign brands, but very likely even a greater number of local franchisees and homegrown brands.
So Philippines could be the market that we have to say, not China.
Not China. China is a different beast. We probably need a different show to talk about China.
Okay, man. I mean, big brands, they have troubles in China too.
Oh,
right?
very big brands. KFC has huge problems in China. They have 4,500 units, but they continue to struggle. Starbucks recently had launched their 1,000th store in China. But again, very, very challenging times in China, just because of the size of the country and the differences in cultures even within China.
Well, it's interesting you just mentioned Pho 24.
Yes.
It was one of the most successful franchising system at that time, but it got into trouble and it was sold out.
Yes.
I mean, in your opinion, what do you think is happening?
Well, first of all, I think they were acquired by the Viet Thai group, and of course Jollibee owns a part of the Viet Thai group. So I think they are in good hands. I think, especially with Jollibee backing them, I think we have a great international regional franchisor that can bring them to the performance that they need to be, and also to develop the brand across the region. I think part of the problems with Pho 24 is that, and you know this as well as I do, we go to different Pho 24s and they all taste a little bit differently. They all look a little bit differently.
So the franchisees, sometimes they make their own decisions and they make the Pho 24 lose out its consistent image because each different store, they have different style of services.
Yes, and even though they're trained initially on what these, what these standards are, from design to the food quality, etc., I think it tends to change over time. And I think specifically with Pho 24, I think they were looking at the wrong franchisees, because some of their franchisees were purely investors. They were not operators. So they would own multiple units, hire somebody, a manager, a local manager, to manage it. Of course, when you hire somebody else to do it and you don't have the passion to go do it yourself, the store quality starts to slip. You start to cut corners. You start to make bad decisions for not only your franchise, but for the entire system.
So is that a lesson for the big brands if they want to come?
It is.
Hiring an operator, not an investor.
Well, that's the reason why many brands use Vietnam franchises, because we're looking not only for investors, but we're looking for experienced operators, people who know the business. And that is critical to long-term success, because it's only the operators that get down to the details and have the passion to make sure that the business is successful. And there are a lot of challenges in developing a brand in Vietnam. In fact, it is more difficult to develop any franchise in Vietnam than it is in their home markets.
I heard that sourcing is one of the biggest problems for the local franchisees. Is that true?
Sourcing is a major problem, because it can really drive expenses for the business, especially if you have to import everything. Luckily for us in Vietnam, we have lots of local suppliers, lots of regional suppliers when it comes to equipment for the kitchen, for example, or even stainless steel. We have lots of options for non-core products. But when it comes to quality beef, when it comes to quality cheeses, for example, unfortunately, even for the region, a lot of those products are still imported from places like Australia or New Zealand or the US, etc.
So are the franchisees trying to solve the problem by finding local suppliers, or they still have to import everything? Or is that a problem? How can we solve the problem?
Well, I think the problem will solve itself out over time. I think there's no doubt that when McDonald's opens up its first store, they'll be importing a lot of products to Vietnam. So that is the case. But that said, McDonald's has a very large presence in the region. In fact, KFC in China, because of the lack of infrastructure, because of the lack of distribution capabilities in China, they went in and they built their own distribution capabilities. So you can see that some of these big brands, when they see huge opportunities in markets, they will go out and build that supply chain for themselves. And of course, when we say that for markets like Vietnam, of course, no one's going to come to Vietnam and build it in Vietnam, but they may build it within ASEAN to service all of the franchisees in the region.
Thank you so much, and we're going to get back after short break.
Thank you.
Thưa quý vị, vừa rồi là những chia sẻ của anh Sean Ngô, là giám đốc điều hành của Vietnam Franchises, là một tổ chức cung cấp các dịch vụ tư vấn liên quan đến nhận việc thương mại của các thương hiệu quốc tế. Chúng tôi sẽ còn quay trở lại sau ít phút giải lao. Quý vị có thể xem lại chương trình trên trang web toivavietnam@pnc.com hoặc là fpnc.vn.